Do you want to start drinking coffee the right way but don't know where to start? In this video, you'll learn coffee basics that will completely change the way your coffee tastes. Hey guys, welcome to another video from Coffee in My Veins, made by coffee lovers and for coffee lovers. Making good coffee may seem like a difficult task, but as you'll see, you just have to get three things right: the coffee beans, the grind, and the brew. Let's talk about coffee beans. Coffee beans are the single most important factor that go into a good brew. If you've only tasted instant coffee so far, you haven't even scratched the surface of good coffee. So how do you determine if coffee beans are good or bad? The first key is freshness. Coffee beans are best enjoyed when freshly roasted. So try to buy beans from craft roasters who roast just before shipping, and try to finish the beans within 14 days of receiving them. Coffee beans tend to stay fresh for about 2 weeks. Also consider the roast you get. You have light, medium, and dark roasts. Light roasts are very fruity and bright and have very little coffee intensity. Medium roasts are very balanced and retain many flavors, but still have a good kick. Dark roasts tend to be very intense and bold. Choose a roast depending on the flavor you expect to get. Once you start using fresh beans, you'll begin to really taste subtle flavor notes and differences. Now that you have freshly roasted beans on hand, you need to grind them just before brewing. This ensures maximum freshness. Once you grind coffee beans, a lot of the carbon dioxide and other flavor compounds that develop during the roasting process escapes. This causes the grounds to go stale and lose most of the flavors, and you're left with a bitter drink. Remember, grind right before you brew. Use a manual grinder if you're on a tight budget. They're cheap. Or pick up an electrical Burr grinder. It's an important investment. Grinds fall under three parts of a spectrum: fine, medium, and coarse. There are grind sizes that fall between these as well. The grind consistency depends on the kind of brew you are looking to do, which brings us to brewing methods. There are three main ways to brew coffee: using pressure, such as with an espresso machine; using gravity, such as with pour over; and using immersion, such as with French press and cold brew. All brewing methods tend to be variants of these. Espresso is very intense and powerful. Gravity brews use paper filters and will be clean and bright, and immersion brews will usually be quite bold. Pressure brews take fine grounds. Gravity brews take fine to medium grounds, and immersion brews take coarse grounds. The least expensive ways to get started are to use an AeroPress or a French press. AeroPress can mimic espresso to a certain extent, and you can use it to make specialty coffees like cappuccinos and lattes, which are essentially shots of espresso mixed with foamed milk. French press is a very beginner-friendly and flavorful brewing method. You can also use French press to froth milk, so you don't have to invest right away in an espresso machine. Remember, good coffee is easy to make. All it takes is fresh coffee beans and a grind matched to your brewing method. For our first cup of coffee, let's make some French press. I'm going to start out by putting the French press on a scale and tearing the scale so it reads 0. This way we'll know exactly how many grounds we're putting in. You can also measure the grounds beforehand. So I've got roughly 16 grams of coffee in my French press. I like to use a 1 to 15 ratio, 15 grams, sorry, the scale corrected itself. So I'm using a 1 to 15 ratio, which means I want to get about 225 grams of water into the French press. I'm going to slowly pour the water and try to wet the grounds as evenly as possible. As you're pouring, you want to stop pouring just about as close to 225 grams, in this case, as possible. I forgot to tear the scale before adding the water, so I'm actually going to go for 225 plus 15, which is 240 grams of water. As you can see, I slightly overshot, but that's okay. As long as you're within 5 or 10 extra grams of water, that'll be fine. Now I'm going to grab a spoon and give the slurry a gentle stir, and then we'll replace the filter on top of the French press and let it rest for 4 minutes. Now that the 4 minutes are up, it's time to plunge and brew. I'm going to grab the plunger, replace it on top of the coffee press, the French press, and slowly push down. The pushing down will separate the coarse coffee grounds from the water. Once we've plunged down, I'm going to grab a mug and start pouring out, and then it's time to enjoy your freshly brewed cup of coffee. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe, and as always, you can check out the blog at coffeeinmyveins.com.